Welcome to a little video from the end of time. If you're watching this video, there's no accident, no mistake, no coincidence. Somewhere in your mind, whether you've recognized it or realized it or not, you're a late time association, early in time. And what that means is that if you believe in the idea of past lives or reincarnation, which is just as feasible as anything else in a dream, in an illusion, even though overall none of it is real, then being a late timer, early in time, you're someone who's put in a lot of work. You're someone who's questioned and begun to look at truth and investigate the principles of forgiveness and tolerance and compassion and all these sorts of things. And somewhere you're applying them and getting the results of it. This little video then is, I always sort of try to make a video or think about putting a video out that's broad reaching for someone who has no clue about spiritual involvement, and for those who perhaps have recognized within themselves that they've been trudging this path for a long time, what seems to be a long time. But in that regard, what even is a long time, really? What is 10,000 years? For they have come, said Jesus. And I was just in the house before, trying to find my stand for my phone, thinking about the idea of time, just what it represents as a linear sequence, and the notion that science has come up with, that perhaps we are 13 or 130 billion years since the Big Bang, and Jesus says in the Course, since the beginning of time, and there may be yet that much as well left to go, if not more. I thought 130 billion years in all of eternity, that's nothing. But when you find yourself here in the framework of the experience of living in that linear sequencing, or living through that linear sequencing, it can be very arduous and time consuming, and every day tends to be a bit of a chore until finally you discover some sort of spiritual modality and you learn to live in the here and the now. And then time doesn't have the same effect on you. The action of constant judgment of the associations of time and the particulars of the cause and effect relationships that you find yourself in don't affect you, because you're outside of that, or you've stepped aside from that judgmental way of seeing the world, and you're just in this kind of state of divine acceptance of the truth of reality, which is eternal and formless and perfect forever. And I can tell you that it's a wonderful thing to let go of the idea of time and just to be here now. Very simple to say that, but the actual practice of applying forgiveness and training the mind to live like that is another thing that can take quite some time, especially with the habituation of the old way of thinking that the mind tends to draw upon initially as a way of coping, as a way of surviving, as a way of living in the world, because it doesn't have another reference. It doesn't have another reference point. It's just got spiritual books and people on videos like this. And how do I even get involved and get started? So the healing path, which is what this is the path of forgiveness and the path of release and everything, is a form of therapy. All healing is a form of therapy. So taking on board the idea then that you are consciously and willingly entering into a therapeutic modality for your own good is something that will help to grease the sides of transition from the old way of thinking to the new way of thinking. But that goal, right, so we said our goal is inner peace, which in this world is not the yin or the yang, it's in the middle. I don't want good or bad, I just want peace. I don't want rich or poor, I just want peace. I don't want better or worse, I just want peace. And we ignore all of the duality of opposites in the world and find ourselves coming back to our center again and again and again. And that's got nothing to do with balance. I often have people say to me, oh, it's awfully hard to find that balance. It's not about balance at all. There's nothing more unstable than the notion of balance, which is a quote that I love from Charles Anderson. It's not about balance. It's about letting go. Letting go of the idea of what you think balance is between the good and the bad, or the yin and the yang, and simply finding a new place, simply finding a fresh moment, a brand new openness wherein communication through the crown, or through the, seems to look like through the crown, but through the mind occurs, which has its origins outside of the framework of time and space. And that eventually comes around through meditation, prayer, and the ongoing involvement in a higher purpose that sees you view yourself as being in service, I guess, to mankind, being a servant of man, whatever that's going to look like in any given situation at any time of the day. And I often, especially amongst women, the female associations, I often find that women and some men, but tend to formulate these ideas that being of service within the framework of time and space looks like that they have to have a job as a yoga instructor or a healer or some kind of thing. It's like, no, you can be a bricklayer, you can carve tombstones for a living, and you can still serve the atonement. It doesn't matter what your job is, just be about the expression of your own internal light in any place that's given, in any way that that comes to you. And often the place that you have resistance, and always actually, always the place that you have resistance to stepping into, whether that be a job or a relationship of a physical form or any kind of thing like that, is going to be exactly what you need. And all resistance being of the ego. The ego always feels the looming threat of the reinterpretation of its defense mechanisms through forgiveness, and so it always tries to head off any notion of change, unless that change, of course, is on its own terms, which isn't really change at all, because change on your own terms isn't the kind of change that we're looking for in spiritual undoing, spiritual reassociation. We're looking for a change that's not of our own terms, a change that is brought about by something other than our own conceptual thoughts about it, our own conscious cognition of it, something that, if you like, you can call a miracle. We need a change that's miracally oriented, miracally minded, and is going to give us that reference point that we want. So through the transition of our old way of thinking to our new way of thinking, we begin to have these supportive indicators, these supportive witnesses to something else going on that's not the usual thing, that's not of our own temporal understanding. And I love the workbook of A Course in Miracles, the whole thing really, the text in the workbook of A Course in Miracles, wherein that's exactly what we're taught, to become miracle-minded, to learn to let everything be miraculous and not to try and control things, but to continue on this ongoing process of letting go of the control of things and allowing something else divine to occur. That's not always easy at first, because the resistance to letting go, and I don't have many memories of it in myself. I've actually let go in radical ways before walking out of my house, job and everything, and done that several times, and just with no anchor in the, what would you call it? No anchor of interest in continuing a line of thinking or a line of association in the world that seems to be sending me in circles. much in the same way that St. Francis of Assisi just threw all his clothes out the window and walked out of his village naked and said, no, I'm starting again. I'm serving God this time. I don't want anything of what was before. And if you're aware of his story, you know what comes next. So the idea then of levels, which is something that I was talking with Jesus about this morning, levels of perception, levels of awareness, of interactive, I guess would be probably an okay word to use, interactive self, where I'm interacting initially externally, looking at the idea of change, and then internally, and then with the acceptance that no change is actually possible because I'm already whole and perfect and therefore forgiveness isn't required. But confusing those levels is something that seems to be quite a common foible of Course in Miracles students or spiritual students. And so it's often good to get back to the basics, even for advanced students. Those who've perhaps completed the workbook, it's still easy in some places that are emotionally loaded, some situations that are emotionally loaded, to have moments of level confusion, and they can be pretty hectic, I'll tell you. I've had some. Had quite a lot. I seem to be having one now, but I'm fully aware that it's not actually so. So, like, I'm awake in the dream. But there's another thing that happens when you try to make a video, and I often have people going, who are you making videos for? There's no one out there but you. But yes, that's right. Everybody out there is me. And that's the ultimate jump in levels. And we've got a visitor. A little rock wallaby over there somewhere. No, it's gone behind the bushes. Anyone who doesn't know what a rock wallaby is, it's like a little small version of a kangaroo that lives amongst the rocks, and we have a very rocky outcrop around here. So in the idea of levels, then, all healing being a form of therapy, initially when you begin to transition from temporal thinking or the associative thinking of the temporal mind to the singular thinking, the what's that called? Horizontal, vertical. The vertical thinking of being miracle-minded, because a leap of faith is required in that, because you're stepping into a place where you're refusing to resolve your own crises or your own issues or your own healing, and you're allowing that to be done miraculously. The appeal to higher mind, or the appeal through prayer to God or to Jesus, whatever you want to look at that as, tends to take the mind into fanciful directions of possibility and belief and faith and all these sorts of things. And there tends to be this kind of need to structure or feeling like that prayer or appeal to higher mind needs to be structured in a certain way that represents one's own affinity with that. It's like I've had people say to me, I don't know what words to use in prayer. I don't know what I should be doing or anything like that. And I always just say, talk to your Father. Just talk to your Father. There's a beautiful line in the Course where Jesus says, God knows what you want before you even ask. And it is though through the opening of the heart and the mind, the heart being the passion and the mind being the place where the decision to appeal through prayer is made, when they come together, the passionate integrity of the heart and that determination of the mind to actually mean the prayer, to actually want the prayer because you really want change. And you have to understand that the background, the running program is, I don't want change. So you're always the liar. You're always coming to prayer as someone who has muddied waters or who has a lack of integrity, the dishonesty. Right? Otherwise, you wouldn't need prayer at all. So when I pray, and it's not that I pray anymore, my prayers are simply thank you, but the initial passage or rite of passage through prayer tends to be a lot of appealing. And I remember in my very, very early days in my teens when I was praying to God, I'd be offering agreements. I'll give up cigarettes, God, if you know. And it's like, man, that's not it. That's totally nothing. If you heal my something, I'll do this. And it's like, no, you don't need to make an agreement or a bargain or whatever. That's just some kind of earthly way of thinking about things that tends to be an attempt to allay guilt or to allay unworthiness or anything like that. So through prayer, level confusion is ironed out, is eliminated, because through prayer, the very bottom, the deepest level of integrity of the heart, which is earth-based, world-based, is attempting to go to the highest level or attempting to reach or communicate with that highest level of presence of self, which is eternal, which is all-encompassing, which is what we call the higher mind or God mind. And all the levels in between, it doesn't matter where you find yourself in a moment of prayer in between, all the levels in between of conscious awareness of self or singular sense of self or any of those sorts of things, they don't matter, right? Prayer never fails, but it is possible that you can fail to recognize the answer to your prayers because quite simply the language of love has to be learned. It's like God doesn't answer you in a way that you want. God answers you in a way that you need. You have to come to this through your own realization that everything that is given to you miraculously is for a good that not only includes you, but also the entirety of the sonship, the entirety of the brotherhood of man. And learning to think that way, learning to think selflessly, is how it is that you begin to perceive what the answer to your prayers are. If you're praying for yourself alone, it's not that you won't be answered, but you'll be answered in a way that opens you up or leads you to a, what would you call it, an understanding that you need to open up more to the all-inclusive, to the entirety of the sonship, to the entirety of the family of man and all living things, life being sacred, in order to fully affect full benefit of the answer to your prayer. The prayer isn't for the body, even though that might be how it begins. You might initially be praying for the healing of the body of some ailment or something, and that transitions to the healing of the mind that believes that it is a body, which I won't get into that right now. But, so prayer totally transcends all level confusion. Right? You can talk to God, and this is kind of like where I wanted to go with this video, but you can talk to God as your Father, just as I'm talking to you now. Just have a heart-to-heart conversation. Okay? There's a place where, and I don't know how anyone ever reaches this place, there's a place where you don't want anyone to suffer. You don't want vengeance. You don't want recrimination, something like that. You don't want vengeance. You don't want anything like that. You don't know how to not have these things. You don't know how to process your thinking and your experience and the cause and effect nature of your relationship so that those ideas of suffering and pain and everything don't become again manifest. But you do reach that place where you realize, no, not this. I'm done with that. And from there, something else can occur. But you have to reach that total place through all prayer. You have to reach that total place through like you've got to see the big picture. You've got to understand the big picture. That can occur conceptually. You can read books and you can sort of realize how you've been thinking versus how an awakened mind thinks. And you'll probably see that you've got a long way to go or a lot of work to do. But remember, the miracle collapses time, and the amount of learning that can be compressed through a miracle is something that you can't put a finger on the total. It could be thousands of years of learning in one miraculous moment. And the whole lesson you're learning, of course, is that I am that, or that there is no world. It's all the same lesson. And in the Course, Jesus says, revelation shows you the truth, but the means are needed to reach it. And also that communication or miracles are your right, but purification is necessary first. You're not going to recognize the receipt of the miracle, the answer to your prayer, if your mind isn't purified from that selfish way to a selfless way of seeing and thinking. And that's just a matter of making a few determined choices and not compromising those choices. So, anywho, we've got Zoom tomorrow. I don't even know what I was going to... I hope that's helpful. We've got Zoom. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to talk about. So I had somebody say to me the other day, I miss your videos of walking on the beach and things like that. And on one level, I don't do that anymore because I no longer have a dog that I would take for a walk to the beach. But also there's a higher sort of reference for all of these things when you begin to truly participate and teach to learn, such as I've been doing for the last 20 years, 26 years, whatever, teaching through these videos and groups that we have here and stuff, teaching to learn and hopefully learning. My God, I'm a slow learner. When you teach to learn, you go through a process, right? So Jesus says, initially you'll have more to learn than to teach, and then eventually you'll teach the maximum that you can possibly offer within the framework of the nature of your relationship with yourself in the reflection that you get of your own light, right? And when that becomes stable, you'll just find that you have this incredible sense of inner peace and you feel yourself to be in the world but not of it. And all of those teaching mechanisms, making videos and everything, they'll tend to become less important or less impressed upon you as something that needs to be done. And you just won't feel the need to teach specifically anymore, but rather just let your own being be the teacher. But the concepts and the principles embodied by the concepts of spiritual discipline are so unlike the concepts and principles of the ways of the world that you kind of have to teach them formally in a certain sense, whether that be through music, through art, through poetry, through writing, through making videos like this, any sort of thing really, but with a formal kind of recognition that that's what you're doing, because that's how you hold yourself accountable. You know, you have to hold yourself accountable to what you teach. And I always teach that there are no rules. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. There's no should or shouldn't. I'm free. And that's what I teach. And I often I had a lady last week berating me, and it's just me berating me, an old idea of self, because I wasn't a vegan. And I'm sure we've all had run-ins with vegans. How could I eat meat if I'm a spiritual teacher? And she wanted to know, why did I ever bother following you? You've got such a lot of old waffle that you talk about. And, so you go through all these rites of passage, let's say, where you declare yourself as the Christ. The rules of the world and the thinking of the world doesn't apply to me anymore. I don't want to trample on it, but at the same time, I'm not going to uphold it in a conscious way, because I'm making a positive assertion or making a deliberate assertion for a transcendent state of mind, which in the world but not of it, sees me free of the rituals and traditions and beliefs of the world. And for anyone who hasn't had a true spiritual experience, that's going to be incredibly hard to break free from, because the emotionality involved around, let's say, even eating meat and slaughtering an animal for food and all that sort of stuff can be very, very hard to let go of. There has to be a recognition that it doesn't matter what you do in the world, you're still going to die. And that animal that you're slaughtering early in life is still going to die at some point. And really, if death is still the functioning idea upon which decisions are made in the mind, then it doesn't matter when that moment's going to be, here, right now, or in 20 years' time or 10 years' time. It simply doesn't matter. Anyway, I think that was what I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, and so as you process through your teaching, learning, ministry, let's say, eventually, like we're in our Zoom meetings, we're almost at the end of the workbook lessons now as a group, and it's been a beautiful transition. It's been a beautiful journey, and I don't know what there's some animal digging around over there. I don't know what at the end of it really means, but there's never really an end. Learning goes on and on and on. The course is just a beginning. But the falling away of the form association of being a teacher, you know, like whether or not you care to allow me to uphold for a moment the identity of an enlightened mind or an awakened mind, or someone who's had an experience of true self beyond the physical nature of the form, doesn't really matter. But the experience shows the truth and the means needed to reach it. Like there's a point where applying the means for me through my teaching and learning ministry seems to be coming to either an end or a transition point or something. And I no longer feel the need to walk on the beach and make these videos and all that sort of thing, even though I'm making one today. As a response to that comment, actually, it's not on the beach, but I think it was Arlene that made that comment. And I thought I should make a little video. I haven't done one for a while. So be about your Father's business. Don't worry about level confusion. Pray. Right? Prayer irons out that level confusion completely. All you need to do is to open your heart to prayer. Your heart already knows the wordless words, if you like, or the already knows the vibration, which is unconditional and all-inclusive, or what would you call altruistic, right, in nature. The heart already has that. Don't fuddle-duddle it up with a noisy mind. That's what the mind training's for. Don't worry about the words. Open your heart like that, and have a moment with your Father without the body, without the framework of support that the physical nature of life seems to offer, because I guarantee you it doesn't actually offer any support. I'm sustained by the love of God. Peace.